Welcome to The Upshot, Ultiworld Disc Golf's podcast about the latest in the disc golf world. I'm the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Josh Mansfield on this Thursday, December 19th. I thought this was going to be our last show of the year, Josh, but no. We've got the gaps bracket, and we're going to push it to next week. So you have a little Christmas gift to unwrap when you are driving or flying or just need to get away from your in-laws for a second or something like that. We've got a little gaps bracket ready for you, all recorded. We had a great time doing that earlier today. But today, we're talking some fandom survey. Josh, have you been enjoying the latest fandom survey data as the articles have started rolling out?
Oh, always. I love these articles. They are so fun to go look at, break down. And the thing is like, I don't just sit and read it. I like read a section at a time and then come back to it because there is so much data on each of these articles. You could spend hours and hours and hours playing around looking at this data. Very interesting information. And as always, I mean, just top tier content from both Jesse and Josiah. Excellent work done by both of them. Indeed.
Quick plug before we get to the interview. Do you want an Upshot mystery box? You can order one. Email discgolf@ultiworld.com. Josh, I'm gonna let you help me set the price right now. I'm thinking I want to go 10 disc mystery box.
Okay.
All prices will include shipping.
Okay.
What's a fair price per disc? This is a mixed bag. It's a collection largely of mystery box purchases from 2023.
Yeah.
You might even get something off my wall, or I also just have a random assortment of other discs around.
Okay.
It's got to be a great deal.
Yeah, it's got to be a good deal. So 8. Okay. So Discmania sells their box, at least this year, for $100 for 8 discs.
Plus shipping.
Yep. The Prodigy Misprints and Factory Seconds box is $43 plus shipping for 5 discs.
That's a great deal.
So that's a good deal. So I think if you could come in...
that's $10 a disc, basically, with shipping.
$10 a disc plus shipping. I think if you could come in like somewhere between 85 and 95 shipped.
95 shipped?
85 shipped that's a killer deal.
85 shipped, I don't know if I can go that crazy.
I think that's probably a little low. But if you could do like 95 shipped, I think you probably have the best deal in disc golf.
95 shipped? And these are not factory set. Well, there may be some factory. There may be some factory seconds in there.
Let me look at what MVP's boxes was this year.
I think theirs is 120 for 11 discs.
Okay.
Or maybe 110 for 11 discs. It's a great deal.
It is a great deal. I mean, listen, if you did $99 for 10 discs shipped, you're coming in at under $10 a disc. That's going to be the best deal anybody's going to get.
I'll do one better and I'll go 95.
Okay.
95 shipped, 10 disc box. I will also do a 5 disc box for straight up 50. 5 disc box for 50, 10 disc box for 95, shipped. To the US. I will ship internationally, but we'll have to come to an agreement on shipping costs just because I haven't quoted it out. I don't know how much it's going to be. I don't want it to be super expensive, but I will ship internationally for like a totally fair price.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, listen, you just gave the best deal in disc golf if you want to bulk discs this Christmas.
I'm doing it. We're making it happen. Upshot mystery boxes. Email upshot@ultiworld.com or discgolf@ultiworld.com and just let me know. And it's going to be first come, first serve. Ultiworld Disc Golf subscribers are going to get the first shot at it in the Discord.
Yep.
And I don't have that many boxes to sell, but I got some special stuff coming in. I just got a box of discs. as a gift that I'm going to include in these mystery boxes. So let me know if you're in. Shoot me an email, and we'll do a little unboxing, and let me know what you think. And maybe we'll do more of this in the future. So I want to have the best deal around. So we're doing sub $10 a disc, which is definitely better than what you could get at any point last year when we did our comparison video, if you want to check that out.
Yeah.
All righty. Time to get into our interview. We're going to welcome in Jesse Weisz and Josiah Zoodsma, and they are going to talk to us about the fandom survey and some of the most interesting data that we've seen so far and what is to come. There's some really interesting stuff, including the #1 most popular disc in disc golf in 2024. Think about what your guess would be. We'll be right back. The Upshot is presented by Pound Disc Golf, makers of the best bags in the sport. I've got my Rufus out on the course every time I play. What a fantastic bag. Now is the chance to get yours for yourself or for someone you love this holiday season. And if you want a little bit bigger bag than a Rufus, you can get $50 off stock Octothorpes through the end of the year. It's a great deal. Today is the last day to order to get your bag before Christmas. The order has to be placed by midnight tonight, and it needs to go either UPS second day air or priority mail express. So get your orders in today if you're looking to get something in time for Christmas. It's a great gift for yourself or the disc golfer in your life. Go to pounddiscgolf.com and check out all of the options. You already know our sponsor, Sunset Lake CBD, has a fantastic CBD product that is farmer owned and grown locally in Vermont. But did you know that they also give back to the community? They were one of the sponsors of the Disc Golf Vermont Tour this season. Yeah, that's disc golf. So they're involved with disc golf in multiple ways. And they're also teaming up with Vermont Food Bank to fight food insecurity in their own community. Vermont Food Bank is the state's largest hunger relief organization and only food bank. So Sunset Lake CBD, whenever you support them, you're supporting the community, not only of disc golfers in Vermont, but also of those who are less fortunate. Head over to sunsetlakecbd.com and pick up your favorite CBD products at 20% off. Just use code UPSHOT. Well, we know you're passionate about hyzer flips and the Disc Golf Pro Tour, but have you ever stopped to think about protecting your family? Friendly Insurance Dad is passionate about keeping families safe because life is unpredictable and accidents can happen to anyone. GoFundMe does not count as a good risk management plan. Here's how it works. Number 1, go request quotes for life or disability insurance at friendlyinsurancedad.com. Check prices yourself or schedule a call. There's no sales pressure if you don't want to speak to anybody. Rest assured, you and your loved ones have a safety net set up. It doesn't cost much more than a disc or two for peace of mind. Head over to friendlyinsurancedad.com to get this off the to-do list. Joining us now on the Upshot, we've got two fine gentlemen from First Available Research, the pair behind the Disc Golf Fandom Survey, now in its 3rd year. Is that right, Jesse?
3rd year.
All right. Jesse Weisz, who is the founder of First Available Research and the Fandom Survey, and Josiah Zoodsma, who is the director of data analytics and all things sort of statistical about this year's survey. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
So, Jesse, 3rd year, you've gotten more responses this year than ever before. I know you got more basically advertising for the survey. A lot of people finding out about it watching on DGN, and many thousands of entries. So this is some of the most interesting and rich player/fan data that we have. I guess it's probably fair to call it more fans than players specifically, because you're sampling people who either listen to podcasts like this one or are watching DGN. So, what have you learned in year 3 about the disc golf community, or about how fans are feeling about the tour?
I mean, we're learning a lot. There's a lot of data, so it's kind of hard to summarize it into one specific statement there. So it all comes out in the articles, the different things that we're learning. But we have a lot more data than we had in the past. We asked a lot more questions than we asked in the past. For people taking the long survey that we had 3 different survey lengths that we offered this year, and the long survey took somewhere between a half an hour and 40 minutes to fill out. And so you imagine you have that times somewhere around 6,500 to 10,000 responses, and that's a lot of data to process, and a lot of information, and lots of different ways that we can present it to the fans in articles.
Before we jump into some of the data and those responses, Josiah, tell us a little bit about the demographics and makeup of what it looks like in terms of people who chose to take this survey, whether that be demographics, where they found it, just a basic understanding of who we're looking at when we move into the data and what their opinions are.
Yeah, so we had a lot of advertising help this year from the DGPT. So a lot of the people who came to take the survey were from either DGN Live coverage or Jomez Pro coverage. So there's definitely a disproportionate amount of professional disc golf fans taking this survey. But there's a large overlap with those and players as well. So we had other more local resources. So PDGA also helped advertise. So we had some people who may not follow disc golf professionally at all, but play. And in future years, we're hoping to get that number even greater. As a whole, I think it was somewhere around 90% of our respondents identified as men, and we had 76% of respondents from the United States. So we had 3/4 of our respondents from the United States and roughly 20% from Europe. So we have pretty good sample sizes from both of those groups to compare in different aspects of the survey. One thing I want to highlight about this year in the survey, when we were designing it, we really wanted to get into the why question more than we had in previous years. So in the first 2 years of the survey, questions like, who is your favorite player, were asked, and we can report on that longitudinally over time, how that changes. But this year, we really put an emphasis on trying to figure out why specific players are respondents' favorite players. What drives us to root for them? And those are the types of questions that we're going into deeper in the articles this year than we had in previous years before.
So, the data is always super interesting. And as usual, it kicked off with the pros that we root for and against. I think what's interesting to me is that there's generally a lot of stability in this data, even as we've scaled up the number of people and getting people from different, a more broad strokes group. Because early on, it was kind of Upshot, Ultiworld disc golf followers, more concentrated there. And then it was more media podcasts. So a lot of people from the foundation land, and then here, the Upshot followers. And now you're looking at the big picture of both Jomez and DGN, plus all of the other things you've done in the past. And yet we're seeing a similar story, which is that, the big popular players of last year remain the big popular players today. Simon, Kristen, Calvin, Owen. So I guess what I would ask is, where are you seeing changes in player popularity? And, what, if you had to speculate, what you think would be driving those?
Yeah, so I'll start with that one in saying that I completely agree with your take that there's a surprising amount of stability right at the top of the most highest in fandom score of these articles. So we wrote that the top 6 players, so the ones you mentioned, Simon, Kristen, Calvin, and Owen, but also Matty O and Nate Sexton, have been the top 6 all 3 years we've done the survey thus far. And I think that really speaks to how unique and rare it is to have players who are universally appealing to the fans, right? That they don't have contingents of people who are rooting strongly against them. So I think that is one takeaway, that having this rare combination of everyone is rooting for you, everyone likes you, is not something that you find in the average player. But to your question about change, so in that first article, we had the change in fandom score year over year, because we can look longitudinally. And we definitely see two different storylines. So one is the emergence of newer players on the tour that people are rooting for. So this is like a Silva Saarinen or an Emily Weatherman jumping really high up into the rankings of being in the top 10 or top 15. And these are people who weren't even in the survey in previous years because they hadn't even competed in a single Disc Golf Pro Tour event. But then you definitely see some players that have swings in their fandom score. They went from having a fair majority of people either not rooting for them or actively rooting against them, shifting to this is becoming a fan favorite player. This is becoming someone that most of the disc golf population cheers for. And the good example of that is Ricky Wysocki and his improvements in this year's survey, both in terms of fandom score and in terms of how many people he is their favorite player.
Yeah, 1.78 increase in fandom score for Ricky, like a huge outlier relative to everybody else. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it really is. And because it was so much of a jump, we dug pretty deep into the Ricky Wysocki increase in fandom score and increase in percent favorite player. And no matter where the respondent came from, like whether it came from DGN, Jomez, or just an email from the PDGA, all of them had Ricky Wysocki's fandom score going up. So it wasn't just like we got this massive influx of a completely different group of people. Just across the board, Ricky Wysocki was getting higher scores. So I do agree with your original take that right at the top of these, who are the universally rooted for players, there's little movement, but there's definitely room for movement from some factors that, we're beginning to be able to track just a little more.
Jesse, I want to direct a question to you with having seen this data kind of for the past 3 years. You see the movement of someone like Ricky, for example, who is a long established player on tour, right? It's not like we don't know who he is, and he makes that jump. And then you compare that with someone like Gannon Burr, for example, who, moved a little bit and did have a 3% increase in people who chose him as his favorite MPO player. But when I looked at the manufacturer, how fans feel about manufacturers, Discmania actually had a lower percentage of people say that was their favorite brand. Obviously, Eagle leaves this year, Gannon comes on. What does this data, especially from what you've seen over the past 3 years, tell us about, number one, what kind of things players need to be doing in order to improve their fandom score? And number two, what does this mean for manufacturers who are trying to sign different players and make decisions about whether or not that's going to be worthwhile to their brand?
I mean, I think in terms of player fandom, what you want to do is win and be on coverage and maybe not say something stupid. I think that that's the combination of winning attributes that's going to make somebody popular. And then in terms of manufacturers, it's an interesting question. I mean, I think that signing beloved players is a very good idea. I think having your players win events is going to be helpful. But I mean, we can look at last year, and Prodigy was one of the least popular manufacturers. Yet Isaac Robinson and Gannon Burr, I mean, obviously we have this Gannon Burr leaving mid-season last year, or I guess the end of the season, but the whole contract dispute. So I don't know. Josiah, do you have like a clear answer there? Because I mean, I think that's kind of hard to read into, but I think it would be the obvious things of don't do stupid things, hire winning players, hire players that are popular.
Yeah, I mean, we explicitly asked like what affects your opinion of disc manufacturers. And again, stressing here that our survey sample population is biased towards people who follow professional disc golf closely, right? Even with that bias, the touring professionals that these manufacturers sponsor was the fourth most selected answer in that. In front of that was how quality are the discs that are produced? What variety of discs are there? And what is the brand and or style of that company? So in self-reporting from these survey respondents, all of those matter more than the touring professionals that you sponsor. So even if your favorite disc golfer goes to a company, you're not going to start throwing that company's disc if the three above are not also being checked. Are they good discs? Do you have a variety? And do you like the style and brand of the company that they move to? Right. So it's not just, I think we sometimes think about this when we're talking about professional disc golf as like, this is the only thing that matters. You know, if this up and coming brand gets to sign this big player, then everything will change and they will be a major player on the market. And the data here suggests that that's not really true. I mean, it can move the needle, can get a conversation started, but, you know, I think that that's what the data suggests. But, you know, again, it's one of those more correlation things than being able to directly state this is the path forward.
One of the things I've been waiting to talk to you guys about is the favorite manufacturers of respondents who started playing disc golf in a specific time frame. I think this might be the most underrated piece of data so far, and I haven't seen anybody talking about it. Basically, the question, you know, if you looked at when did you start playing disc golf and you put people into various buckets, you know, old school people who started playing before the year 2000, 2000 to 2014, 2015 to 2018, then kind of like the early COVID boom, 2019 to 2021, and then the like post-COVID folks, 2022 to 2024. And you kind of track what their favorite brand is. You look at the old school people, Innova is nearly a majority. I mean, 44.4% of people who started playing back in the day pick Innova as their favorite. And that number gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller for Innova as you move forward in time and people have started playing more recently. And I think what's notable is that if you combine MVP and Axiom for the newest players, the combined MVP Axiom score is 27.9%, which is way bigger than Innova at 19.8 or Discraft at 14%. And, you know, even if you go back in time, like MVP Axiom has fans from older time periods. I think if you asked the same question 10 years ago, like, you know, nobody even knows about MVP. I don't even remember when MVP started as a brand, but like, obviously they have been an ascendant company. But the thing that I want to get to is, should this be concerning for the legacy brands that they see a more upstart, but now certainly well-established MVP universe of their brands, having now taken over the sort of quote-unquote mind share of the newest players, and maybe suggesting how market share trends could shift moving forward?
Yeah, I definitely think that could be the case. And I am happy that you appreciate this figure. So I think one thing to stress here is that this is just asking about favorite manufacturer, right? And every respondent was only able to choose a single favorite manufacturer. We have the same breakdown in the article that's coming out next from the series about discs in terms of what discs players currently have in their bag. And we can see the exact same trends in that article with MVP and Axiom. Every single one of these successive, you know, groups of survey respondents who started playing newer have more and more MVP and Axiom in their bag, while Innova is starting to, you know, trail off from being the dominant force, you know, in, you know, as you said, the pre-2000 grouping, these people who started playing when only Innova was there, they may not be transitioning to these newer brands as much as the people who are entering the sport. So I think you said it well, that this could be a wake-up call that the discs and brands that get the newer players most excited are changing. Whether that's actually changing how much they're buying, we don't necessarily have that data, but just what is, you know, these newer players entering the sport, which brand do they most associate with and which brand do they most want to play, which is their favorite, that seems to be shifting.
When you look at the factor driving manufacturer fandom, you've identified some different elements about, you know, things that people found as popular. I found it interesting that the quality of the discs they produce most positively drove fandom for Axiom throwers or purchasers or those who say that Axiom is their favorite. I'm curious to know, was MVP also near the top? Was it very close between those two?
Yeah, I can go quick and look that up. So how we did this is we asked about how much do respondents value specific attributes for manufacturers. And as you said, quality of the disc is one of them. And we asked people to rate that on a scale of 1 to 5. How much do you value this in a company? And we were able to do this, what's called an unbiased analysis of the companies, and basically ask which company's fandom score changed the most depending on respondents' answer to what they value. So if someone gave, I value this a lot, 5 out of 5 for quality of disc, what fandom score did they give Axiom? And if they said, I don't value this at all, what fandom score did they give Axiom? And we can look across those to see which of these companies had their fandom score most changed by, respondents who increasingly valued a specific thing. So Axiom was the leading one on that, but I would wager that MVP was up there as well. But it'll take me a minute to get to that.
Axiom and MVP, their numbers throughout kind of really mirrored each other, as you would expect. So, and it makes it tricky because we've got these 3 different brands from them, and it sort of divides sometimes. In terms of what's your favorite manufacturer. If somebody's saying MVP and saying Axiom, they're sort of saying the same thing. I just like colors around the rims is really the only difference there.
It's hard because you have companies like DGA, for example, that like it feels like a similar relationship, but also at the same time does feel a little bit more distinct than MVP Axiom does. And so I'd imagine for you guys, it's a little bit difficult of how you handle these subgroups underneath that are manufactured by a company, and we know that they are manufactured by a company and have close relations with that company, but technically is a different brand. And when is it like different enough to justify that separation versus not? MVP Axiom obviously being the closest, and then I don't know, Innova and Infinite Discs, for example, being kind of a little bit more distinct group.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And we erred on the side of let's separate and see if we see unique changes, unique differences in these. But as you have seen in the interactive graphs that are being put into these articles, they allow for the reader to ask the questions that they're interested in, right? So when we're talking about, share of percent favorite manufacturer in the different age groups, readers can select both MVP and Axiom and compare that percentage to other ones. But if we had already combined them, they wouldn't be able to separate them. And Josh, just to loop back to your question about quality of the discs with Axiom being on top, MVP is definitely right up there as well. And the other 2 that are closest to Axiom are Streamline and Discraft. So the whole MVP Axiom Streamline family is up there, and Discraft is the other one that has their score driving that.
Is all very interesting. Now, I know you have an article coming up. You just teased it a moment ago about discs. Can you give us a couple of early insights into what we're going to learn in that one?
Yeah, so we just finished up that article, and it's currently being edited for release, hopefully early next week. So we, for the first time, asked respondents not only who their favorite manufacturer was, which was reported in the previous article, but both what manufacturers or brands do they bag and have purchased in the last year. So we have some really interesting data on that, because I think that really gets more to market questions than just, is this company your favorite, right? Because it can be your favorite, but you buy more of 3 other companies, So those questions are interesting. But for the first time, we also just asked, what is your favorite disc? So we have over 4,000 respondents to this question of what is your favorite disc? And we have some really fun breakdowns of that again are just us able to talk about this from a standpoint of, we are not a disc manufacturer. All the other times we've seen, disc sales stuff, it's typically from a company that might get or sell more of a specific company. So all of them have asterisks next to it of their so Infinite. We have some really interesting output of the top 10 most favorited, as well as the top 3 most favorited for every speed class of disc.
Interesting.
So very, very, I think talk-provoking items are going to be in there. And to spoil Josh, no one likes the tomb. I think that's your in the bag. So,
come on, don't come at me like that.
Yeah, so I think I
More
probably
cheap
could.
tombs for
If
you,
you
Josh.
took the survey and said your favorite disc was the tomb, we could probably find your survey because no one else likes the tomb.
Okay, Josh and I are each going to take a guess as to what the number one most popular disc is in 2024. Josh, do you want to go first?
Wait, and before you guys, I want to caveat here that this is what disc is a respondent's most favorite. So this isn't popularity in sales. This isn't like which sold the most. It is what is your favorite disc? This is your answer.
I'll go first, Charlie. I have what I think is the obvious answer, and I'm going to divert just a little bit from that. I'm going to say
guesses.
I'm going to say Innova Wraith.
Whoa, that's a crazy one. It's probably up there, but not number one.
Okay, Charlie, what's your guess?
I'm going to go... I have three that are in my mind. Envy, Destroyer, Buzz. I'll say Buzz.
You are right, Charlie.
Let's go, baby. Fairly so. Fantastic.
I thought about
disc.
picking Buzz. That was like
disc.
the obvious, but I wanted to see if I could sneak it.
Neither of you mentioned number 2.
Is it a hex?
On the list. It's not a hex.
What speed class? Like what are we talking here?
Approach.
Is it a Berg?
No, too niche. It's either a harp or a zone. I'll say zone.
Yeah, it's the zone.
It's a zone, yeah.
So in this article, I'll have the breakdown of like how many people responded each of these, but also for each speed class, I think it gets very interesting in terms of, you can see, is the Berg the most popular one speed? We'll see.
I don't know. With the glitch coming out, might not even be the most popular one speed.
That's very interesting.
The current iteration of the article doesn't have this in there, but I was breaking down by what year someone started playing disc golf and what is their favorite disc, right? So this not just grouped how we have in the previous times. If someone started in 2023, what is their favorite disc? And the past 3 or 4 years, the number one answer has been an Axiom disc, while before that, it never was.
Interesting.
So that was a really interesting, and I think it was 2021 that the first one was, and that was the year that the Hex was released, 2020 or 2021. So since the Hex was released, every single year, the most favorited since then has been an Axiom disc, either the Hex or the Crave. So again, that's getting at this shift from away from these legacy Discraft and Innovas, Buzzes, and Wraiths to the newer companies on the block, and their favorite discs are aligning with those favorite company questions we're asking.
Was the Envy number one in the Holy Shot year?
It was not.
It was the Hex. Wow. Very interesting.
Ken Climo's about to sell some discs with Discraft. I think this is just, I don't know if I even have a necessary question. I'm very interested to see how Ken Climo's discs perform next year. And I hope that even if they are like Ken Climo buzzes, that there's a subcategory in the survey that asks about how many people bought Ken Climo discs.
Yeah. No, so we actually read about, so in this disc article, we also have the percentage, how many respondents purchased a Tour Signature Series disc, how we've done in previous articles as well. Yep. There's some interesting shifts in that, but one thing that we alluded to and what we're wanting to do in future years is have the same question, but for non-touring players. So this could be like a Ken Climo, where could be a marketing force for Discraft, but wouldn't be actively on the tour. This also could be for sponsored YouTubers who are not actively touring, like an Anthony Bedanza. Yep. And I'm really curious to see how those, sale numbers compare to some of the pros. And I mean, obviously the companies that are sponsoring these players know this question, but how it compares across the landscape and what, affects that would be interesting to look into in future years.
Jesse, you started a company this year to kind of run this survey, and it's been done a little bit more informally sort of through Ultiworld Disc Golf, and now you've kind of spun it off into its own thing and still publishing articles on the website. How has that process gone? Because I know that you had ambitions to essentially sell industry market research to companies that goes well deeper and above and beyond what is being publicly released. How did those efforts go this year?
It's been a mixed bag. I mean, it's our first year. And so it's one thing, it's really hard to figure out what's the price for this. We don't really have a basis to start from. And initially, our thought was that the disc manufacturers are going to want to have this data. This is super valuable. This is research that nobody's ever had before. And they haven't been chomping at the bit to work with us. So we've gotten kind of mixed signals from some of them. Some of them have basically said, we know everything we need to know to make our decisions. We're not interested in this. Others have been very interested in this, but they might be in a money pinch. So they're not ready to invest in it now. So, we'll see. And, this is where most of the money is in the sport is in the disc manufacturers. That said, it's been the smaller companies that have been very interested in working with us. And so we have a bunch of clients, that are, for example, we work with IDEO, Zuka, Tech Disc, and one of the agents asked for a packet for a prominent free agent. So they have been asking us to answer questions for them and use our data to help them make decisions. And we'll see if others in the sport will do that, because that's what makes doing this project sustainable. The amount of time that Josiah pours into this and that I pour into this, it's a hobby out of control. And we're hoping that there is some kind of way to, continue to pay for the expense of this and also hopefully pay us for some of our time, that we're putting into this project.
I'm here. So my I guess one follow-up, have you attempted to reach out to manufacturers for their sales numbers? Because obviously, while this is an amazing survey in terms of the respondents that did respond, you alluded to at the beginning that you would like to capture more of the fans who aren't following professional disc golf, right? I think that's of your pool, that's probably a outsized group that is out, like, overrepresented, as opposed to like your casual fan who owns 3-4 discs who just plays at the local nine hole course. So my question then is, have you attempted to just get sales directly from manufacturers, and whitewash those a little bit, or from even like OTB and Infinite Discs and washing those sales numbers a little bit, or not yet?
We haven't attempted that, and I don't know if we have time,
Sure.
And I'm pretty sure they're going to say no as well. No, we have not gone down that road.
Okay. The other question I wanted to ask is, from all this data, I mean, there are extensive articles, and everyone should make sure to take the time to go read it. What would you say was the most surprising, or in your opinion, remarkable find of the survey this year?
Ooh, that's tough. In part because all the articles haven't been released. I think in the latest article, the one about manufacturers, I was particularly surprised about how a respondent's favorite manufacturer doesn't necessarily track well with their favorite player. So I think, so this was talked about a little in the previous episode, and Charlie was going through some of the case studies, and like, you oftentimes see a bump in, from maybe like 20 to 25% of people whose favorite manufacturer is Innova in their fandom of Calvin Heimberg or something like that. But the fact that those seem to be relatively independent of each other, except for a couple specific players where you have like a Kristen Tatar making up over 60% of Latitude 64's favorite, so things like that are the outliers to it. But across the board, I was expecting to see like every single player have over 50% of their favorite fans following their current sponsored manufacturer. And that was definitely not the case across the data.
Yeah, I also found that really interesting, because it's like, seems like it's a little bit of a two-way street in terms of, it's not like just that players bring popularity to brands. It's also that brands can bring popularity to players. And I think we've seen that companies that invest in marketing for their players who maybe aren't at the highest level, but they still promote tour series. I mean, I think Discraft's probably the best example of doing this well. They have a bunch of players who have become probably more popular than maybe they would be punching at if they were on another team, for instance, because they're getting that marketing. At least I get the sense. Obviously, this data isn't really going to specifically tell us that, but it is interesting. And like an association with a bad company might also hurt your fandom relative to if you were with a company that people like their discs more. That's not a question. I'm just sorry. I should ask a question, but I agree that it's very interesting.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And the other really interesting thing that is 2 articles from now in the release is looking at how we consume disc golf media. And one of the question lines that we added to this survey was, what changes your likelihood of watching a tournament? And some things are like the courses that are being played, which pros are going there, but also answers like who is commentating, right? So we can start to parse that out. And I think it's going to be really interesting to look at that across how long someone has been following professional disc golf, right? It's the same things that are being valued by the person who's been following professional disc golf since the DGPT inception a decade ago, are the same as the ones who started following last year. The only reason I know DGPT inception a decade ago is because of how many times you have brought up the 10-year boxes. So.
The effing box.
Yeah.
Well, look, I mean, it's successful marketing if Josiah still remembers that. So it obviously worked.
That was their plan all along.
That's right.
Personal gaffes bracket. Yeah, well, it's going to be really interesting to see what comes of this. What are the goals for this fandom survey longer run, Jesse?
I mean, I think the longitudinal data is very interesting. I mean, if we could go back in time and look and see just how popular was Paul McBeth compared to Ricky Wysocki in their peaks, I'd love to know that, but we won't because we don't have that data. But going forward, if we keep doing this, we'll be able to figure out these trends over time. And that is one of the long-term goals of this. And then the other thing is we'd like to be able to help people in the sport make better decisions. And that goes to the DGPT, the PDGA. And that's one of the reasons why they partnered with us, is because we can get them answers that they didn't have necessarily. And the same thing goes with manufacturers and goes with other companies in the sport, and also for journalism. This is giving more data so that we can understand the sport better, instead of just having these conversations online where we're debating back and forth about this person's popular. They're popular for this reason. This manufacturer, nobody likes them for this reason. We have data to back that up, and so that we can all have more intelligent discussions. And that's long term. We want to continue that.
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
I was going to say, building on that answer, I also wanted to say that what Jesse said of helping decision makers in the sport make better decisions. I mean, when we designed the survey this year, we partnered and structured specific sections to be of topics and question lines that were of interest to the PDGA and DGPT. And so what we're publishing is a lot more of the professional facing side, what's interesting talking points on the, in Ultiworld or across the disc golf community. But I think a definite important thing of the survey moving forward is continuing to help these decision makers make informed decisions.
Well, it brings up a thing I wanted to get to, which is, and I know this isn't really going to be indicated in the survey, and in many ways, you have way more survey respondents than you did last year. So things are booming for the survey, but things are not booming in the disc golf industry right now. A lot of people are struggling. We've seen layoffs. We've seen tightening belts, pros contracts getting cut down in size, or having a hard time finding a sponsorship as the, sales slowdown has kind of started to hit every aspect of the industry. So my question is, are there things that you see in the data that you feel like are green shoots, or that would be maybe areas for the leadership of disc golf writ large to be thinking about in terms of trying to drive new interest in either the pro game or just straight up participation?
We do ask on the survey whether you're following disc golf more closely this year than you were last year. And so that's something that we can dig into a little bit that we have not featured in any of our articles yet. And so we can take a look into that, but I don't know, Josiah, are you seeing anything that is giving you those signals? Because I don't think our survey is really set up to answer those questions.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I do think that certain parts of the data that we've collected and the data that we're distributing are of interest to manufacturers if belts are being tightened, right? If the question is just like, where should our money be going? Stuff in the manufacturer in the disc article suggests, building up certain parts of your brand, but maybe not others, or certain players that are driving the sale of their disc versus the mold of the disc driving the sale, right? Stuff like that could be informative, but it isn't really indicative of a broader, question of how is the disc golf industry doing? We have some data about how many discs you've purchased in the past year. And after this conversation, I think it's worth comparing that to previous years and seeing how those align and potentially seeing if those how well those correlate with how much you follow professional disc golf. Because that's a really interesting question there, where if you consume more professional disc golf, is that a clear route to purchasing more discs? Or how soon after you join the disc golf industry are you purchasing the most discs? Right. So we did some of that analysis, and it looks like 2 to 3 years after you started playing is the peak of when you're purchasing the most discs. But all of that, again, is informative to manufacturers or decision makers in the sport making decisions, but it by itself isn't necessarily saying disc golf is booming right now or disc golf is in its toughest time, right?
Well, can I ask you, are people more engaged this year than they were last year, since you specifically asked that question, with the following the Pro Tour?
It's funny, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see Josiah and Jesse both turn their heads away and reach out to start going to their spreadsheets.
Yeah.
Yeah, always have the spreadsheets ready to go.
Yeah, I'm going to go to our Josiah, I'm going to the 2023 sheet.
I would love to see the comparison to last year too, for sure.
So for last year, when we compared 2023 to 2022 in terms of whether you're following disc golf more closely or less closely, we asked on a 0 to 10 scale, 0 being less closely, 10 being more closely, how are you following the sport in comparison? So we had 12.9% people give a 10 in terms of more closely. And then it goes down to 5.4 for 9, a 9, 8.5 for an 8, 11.2 for a 7. So it's 11.2 for 6. So most of the people are following disc golf more closely. 33.7, a third of respondents are following it the same. And then there's very few people that are following disc golf less closely when we asked this question last year. 9.3% gave 4s, and then it goes all the way down to for 0.6. And this is logical because if you're filling out the survey, it means that you're following disc golf still. So this is kind of what we would expect. Josiah, how would you compare that to what we saw this year?
Yeah, so this year it's a similar story. So the average response on the 0 to 10 scale was a 5.8. So that's slightly above what you were doing last year, because 5 would be I'm following the exact same amount. But over 40% of people said they were following it the exact same amount as last year. So that's the large bulk of respondents giving this a 5 out of 10, and then a slightly biased on the I'm following a little more than last year. So,
but it sounds like there's definitely more people following it less closely than last year, which sounds right. Obviously, there's like slightly different samples between the 2 years, so you kind of have to adjust for that. But over time, this will become a more meaningful thing, I would imagine.
Yeah. And we'll have analysis of this in an actual article that will, directly compare these things instead of Josiah and I just trying to figure it out on the fly.
Yeah, and I think your line of questioning actually brings up an interesting idea that we can cross-tabulate this question, this 0 to 10 ranking, and see what other factors seem to intersect interestingly with this, right? Is it how you consume, right? Is it like if Joe Mez video versus DGN Live versus how that intersects with how closely you're following disc golf, or questions about like the non-professional side that you consume. So like if you consume Simon Lizotte YouTube videos, are you more likely to be excited and following disc golf more than you were last year? So I think that would be interesting to dive into. One thing I want to encourage any listener or any reader of the articles is in every article at the bottom, we've included a link to just like a 2-question survey that basically is, do you have ideas for things that you would like to see appear in an article or interactions that you would like to see? So Jesse and I are putting together articles that are things that are interesting to us and questions that we think are interesting to the disc golf community. But if there are specific things that any of our conversations or any of our articles have brought up in your mind as this is a really interesting question, I wonder if they have the data to ask about it, fill out that survey at the bottom, because we would love to include some of those in either a mailbag article or in a future article that we haven't released yet.
I will spend some time thinking about that, and I will submit my questions.
I will also submit my questions. I have one in particular that I thought of as we were talking.
Should you ask it now, or should you save it?
I can tell them now. I'll put it in so they have it in the survey as well. I'm curious to know, in terms of that engagement, how people follow the new Go Throw Tour and their consumption of the new Go Throw Tour. And I'd be interested how we delineate that next year with the Pro Tour and other forms of disc golf entertainment.
Yeah, I think with multiple different tours, if the Go Throw, is as advertised, we would have to refine some of the wording in the questions this year and not just say professional disc golf coverage, but specify which coverage we're talking about.
I would also be interested to know if there is any fall off or change in consumption habits during the European swing, when like live disc golf is harder to consume for Americans based on time zone differences. So anyway, I'll put those questions in the survey, but.
All right. Well, is there anything else you guys want to add? Anything other notable stats or things you want to share before you sign off?
No, just read the articles.
Yeah.
There's
so
lots and lots of data in there.
It's so deep.
And yeah.
Yeah, I want to plug one thing in the articles. So us talking about the articles is interesting and good, but we tried to structure the articles this year and some of the graphics to allow you to ask the questions that you were most interested in. So a lot of the graphs are interactive, and I think actually going to the article on the Ultiworld site, or we have links to all the articles on our discgolfsurvey.com, is definitely a benefit in terms of getting the full scope of the data.
Yep, 100%. I mean, I've been in there putting in my own filters and stuff, looking at things. It's a lot of fun. So appreciate your efforts on this, and thank you so much for coming on and talking with us about it.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Yeah, thanks,
Weisz,
Charlie. So, Charlie, thank you for supporting the fandom survey from the get-go. So this was a joint collaboration.
Yes, it certainly is, and hope to do it for a long time to come. Jesse Weisz, Josiah Zoodsma with us here on The Upshot. We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Upshot. Well, thanks again to Jesse and Josiah for coming on. Great to talk with them. And Josh, I mean, I feel like a lot of good stuff still to come. This Discs article next week, I'm very much looking forward to.
Me too. I think that's the one. I think that's in part so interesting because, we talk a lot about pros anyway, but it's hard for us to get insight into what, people actually do with their discs and their bags outside of what we just see from our own community. So that's the one that I think we have the least amount of insight to just based on our experiences. And so I'm excited to see a lot more of it in that data.
Are we prepared for the onslaught of sponsorship news that is going to hit us in the next 2 weeks?
Man, I hope it's good. I hope there's some,
honestly,
stuff.
Here's what I hope. I hope everyone just waits until January 1st. Let's all take the holiday off. I don't want to work over the holidays. I don't. So if there is news, if there are things to discuss, Josh and I will pop in and do it live in the Discord for our subscribers in our Inside the Circle segment. And so make sure you get your subscription today and get your first shot at a mystery box as well. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. For Josh Mansfield, I'm Charlie Eisenhood. Happy holidays. Gaff bracket next week. Josh, I look forward to talking to you, maybe not until 2025.
Have a happy holidays, friend.
Happy holidays. Bye, everybody.